starting our next session, but before we do that, some house rules. I'm sure you all know what we are supposed to do when we are here at this beautiful festival, but I would request when you come in for a session, if you can keep your phones on silent. And if you need to talk, I know friends call and there can be an emergency, so you can just slip out and can talk to your friends freely. But in the venue, we have to be respectful to the speakers who are here, especially for us. So keep your mobiles on silent when you are here in the venue. Secondly, our venue has to look beautiful. So you can bring in your cup of tea, cup of coffee. I know it's going to be cold, so you would like to have your morning coffee, morning tea. In the afternoon, when you feel sleepy, you need a cup of tea. Do bring in your cup of tea, but when you go back, your empty cup should go back with you. I think you all agree with me on that, right? Some more rules are there, but I think for now, your mobile's off and your coffee tea cups has to go back with you. There are dustbins out there, so you can throw in there. And we have these beautiful sessions going on throughout in 6 venues. We will be on for 5 days. All the information about these beautiful sessions is in this book. So this is available, I think, at the information counter, or you can check at the information counter. Go buy this. It's a beautiful book, only 100 rupees. So you can go and buy this book at the information counter. I think I have 2 more minutes to go on. Yeah, this year we have beautiful merchandise. We have a lot of food stalls, but we are cashless in this premises, which means it's not that you can't buy anything. It's just that there's no money transactions. But we have these stations where you can go charge these cards. I have 2,000 rupees on this card, so I can go anytime and buy whatever I want. All I actually needed to do, I went there, I gave them 2,000 rupees, and they put in the money on this badge. So wherever I go, they just scan it, and the money goes minus, like in any food court. So I would encourage all of you, whenever you're not attending a session or in between, just go and charge your cards there, and let's do this cashless thing, make it a success. We have made sort of a lot of efforts, a lot of work has gone in. So you go charge your card and do shopping, okay? These merchandise people, they have come here, so they must go back with some money in their pocket. So you go charge your cards. And another thing, all of you, we like to take selfies with the authors. We like to take photographs of this beautiful festival. So, and all of you, Facebook, you all tweet. So you use the our Facebook page, or your Facebook page, and tweet at #ZJLF, which is mentioned all over there. So do that so that many more people know about this festival, and they come while it's on this time for the 5 days, and the next year, and the worlds have to go on travel. So do use the social media to talk about this beautiful festival, 10 years of this beautiful festival. So with that, I think we are ready for our next sessions. Our beautiful authors are here. So our next session here is Sakshi, the witness. We have S.L. Bhairappa in conversation with Vivek Shanbag, and this session is presented by Bhaskar Bhasha Series.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am very pleased to introduce Sri S.L. Bhairappa today. He is one of the most popular Kannada writers. In fact, the popular Kannada writer today, who has written over 24 novels and many non-fiction books. Some of his novels have run into over 40 reprints. In fact, his latest novel, which was released 4 days ago, has already gone into 3 reprints. He is so popular. Not just in Kannada, his novels have been translated into many other Indian languages, almost all Indian languages, and he is equally popular in other languages as well. In Hindi, he is one of the top 5 best-selling authors. He has been writing over 5 decades and has got immense love and affection from Kannadigas and other lovers of literature in India and abroad. He has received many awards and recognitions. Some of that is Saraswati Samman, Sahitya Akademi Award. He is also a fellow of the Sahitya Academy, which is the highest honor that Academy gives. Also, he is a national professor since 2015. Sir, let us start our conversation with, with your Bhitti, which is your autobiography. And it has, you have traveled, you have really, gone through many hardship in your early days. And still, despite all this, you pursued knowledge, you pursued your education. And in between, there was a time when you gave up everything and moved around for a year. And nowadays we call it, with fancy terms saying break year, but it was for you, it was really a year which in a way changed your life and brought new experiences. Can you talk about it?
I come from a poor family. During my grandfather's time, we were economically comfortable, and due to Viveka, sorry, your name is Viveka, due to Viveka of my grandmother and my father, we lost all our property, and when I was born, we were very poor. During those days, there used to be frequent visitation of plague. And during one such plague, my elder brother and my elder sister both died on the same day. And after 2 years, my mother died out of plague. And afterwards, my younger brother and younger sister died of something else. So I saw a lot of death even during my very early period. And because of my poverty, I had to struggle very much for my even living. But due to advice of some of my teachers, I continued my education. So I had to struggle for my existence and for my education. And during those days, I worked as a gatekeeper of a cinema theater, and as a supplier in a hotel, and as a touring agent of agarbattis, and so on and so forth. All those experiences during those days, I used to think I am a very unlucky person. But now if I look back, all those experiences have enriched my experience, and it has helped me as a writer, because I have seen at least 200 villages around in my area. I have seen intimately at least 200 villages, and I had to travel a lot. All this experience gave me, enriched me, and it has helped me as a writer.
It is your Bhitti is like it reads like a novel because it will, it is rich with so many details and there is also a mention that in Bhitti, you grew up with mingling with all kinds of people, all kinds of people from different castes. You ate with them. There was absolutely in your mind there was no difference between you never treated anyone or people treated you as someone of not their caste. And there is an incident where you were eligible for a scholarship,
Yes.
and you don't get it because you are a Brahmin. And then there is an intervention done by your teacher, and then you get it. Similarly, there is another occasion where you don't get it. And there's an interesting comment you make in your autobiography where you say that you recognized that there is the people from other caste must get this, and you did not feel bad that that it is given to them, and you feel that they deserve it because you have seen them with such, you have seen their poverty, you have seen their struggle, you have seen them very closely. You make this comment, and then you say that without that they could not have done. They could not really, come up in life. At the same time, you also feel that you also had deserved this. And then you move on to say that government should have established hostels for all caste, which would have resulted into intercaste marriages.
Yes.
And eradicated caste system to some extent. Can you talk about it? Because this is a very interesting detail I found.
You see, when we got independence, the government took to the planning of reservation. But unfortunately, they adopted reservation on the basis of caste, and they gave scholarships, etc. And they decided, caste became the basis of poverty. That was a wrong move. And with this result, people became more and more, students and others also became more and more caste conscious. And the result we are experiencing today. If the government had made all poor students will get concession, all poor students will get free hostel accommodation, etc., then all students would live together, of all the castes, would live together, and there would be friendship among themselves, and there would be understanding between people of different castes. Now, what is happening is, at least in Karnataka and in South India, there are caste-based hostels. Caste leaders started hostels for the improvement of their caste. With the result, the students will grow up among their castes, and they know it is their caste people, caste leaders who helped them to come up in life. Therefore, they must be loyal to their caste, and they must repay to their caste, etc. This way it has become very, very strong. Not only that, soon after election, see, I was born in 1931, and I remember very well when we got our independence in 1947. When our first election took place, the same Congress leaders who speak of secularism always, and even now they are speaking of secularism. And when they choose the leaders, when they choose the candidates for their election, they would say, which is the dominant caste in this constituency, and we must select a person from that caste only, and they would select a leader from that caste. And the opposition party, in order to counter them, would select a leader from the same caste, etc. Elections were fought on the basis of caste, even in our first election. And this education system also, I told you about it. So this way, this caste system became stronger and stronger. This is the most unfortunate thing that our leaders did.
See, there is a certain way in which you deal with our past. When I say past, it's tradition, culture, etc., etc. And that is again something that every political party deals with in their own way, whether it is Congress, BJP, or whatever.
Yes.
How are you different from them? What is your and your treatment is quite different, right? I mean, you treat it in a certain way. So how do you see yourself differently from these people?
See, the big is, I told you I lost my mother when I was a young man of 13 years. I lost my brother, sister, and in fact, when I was a boy of 15, I carried the dead body of my younger brother who was 5-year-old, and I carried it on my shoulder, and then I cremated him. So all this experience made me think, what is the meaning of death? Why do people die? As a young boy, I started thinking about it. And then when I was in intermediate class in Mysore, I met a professor of philosophy and asked him, what is the meaning of death? And then he gave me the Kannada translation of Kathopanishad. And you know the story of Kathopanishad, where Nachiketa will go to Yama himself and then ask about death, saying, does anything survive after death? Then you know the story of Kathopanishad. Then I read that book, and after I read that book, I could not understand it fully. Again I met the professor, and then he said, philosophy is a difficult subject. You better take philosophy for your BA and then MA, then you will understand all these Upanishads, etc. Therefore, I took to the study of philosophy. And philosophy became my professional subject also. So this way, I have studied and taught Western philosophy and Indian philosophy also. So my approach is academic to all these problems. My approach is sociological. What was the origin of caste and the development of caste, etc. And what is the meaning of our Purana? What is the meaning of God? Whether there is God? And, in India, actually, if you take philosophically, there are less number of people in Indian tradition who believed in God. Less number of people. Buddhists do not believe in God. Jains do not believe in God. If you go to Upanishads, they don't believe in these gods are all Purana from at the Purana's time only. And then if you go to Vedanta, there is this Nirakara Brahma only, no Sakara Brahma, etc. So all this has influenced me. And when I look at the fights that takes place in the name of God or in the name of caste, etc., and each caste projecting the supremacy of a particular God, etc., I think it is all silly, funny, because the thing is they don't know what they are talking. Because all this again has given birth to caste, and then caste has magnified a particular God. For example, Hanuman, for example, Rama, and for example, this God, that God, etc., etc. And especially, each caste is inventing new gods and projecting new gods, etc. For me, as a student of philosophy, it looks funny. And as a creative writer, it gives a lot of material for me, and I am benefited from that.
Your novel Parva, which is which is based on Mahabharata, which is a rewriting of Mahabharata, is the most popular one in Kannada as well as in other Indian languages. Now, this is when you have approached it in a realistic manner. What I mean to say is that the Mahabharata is written as if it has happened some few thousand years ago. So you have set it in time in some place. So a work of fiction, you see it as a reality, as something that. So what is the what is the thought behind this treatment?
You see, both Mahabharata and then Ramayana are based on Puranas. And those characters are considered gods or semi-gods. Therefore, they mix the behavior of the Ramayana and Mahabharata characters with all kinds of myths. Now, I look at them, if based on Ramayana and Mahabharata, many people have, in all Indian languages, many people have written. For example, you have, Tulsidas Ramayana and so on and so forth. Now, there is a difference. I mean, there is a dimension in all these characters which is not explored by earlier poets. For example, Draupadi has 5 husbands. Was she happy with 5 husbands? Could she love all these 5 husbands equally? No, is there no conflict in Draupadi's mind? No, this is not explored by any other writers. So I thought this is an area where I could develop the character of Draupadi in a different manner. And take the case of Gandhari. Gandhari puts covers her eyes from beginning to end. Why did Gandhari do it? What must be the reason for it? If Gandhari had not covered her eyes, at least she could have brought up her children in a better way, because Gandhari's husband himself was a blind person. Why did Gandhari do it? Now, my explanation by my imagination was, Dhritarashtra was a blind person. There was no royal family which would give their daughter in marriage to this blind man. Bhishma was a very strong person. He went to Gandhara Desha and then he gave rich presentation to the Gandhara king and also threatened him. He went with his army saying, if you don't give your daughter, we will attack your kingdom. So this girl was given in marriage to Dhritarashtra. And my treatment is, as a protest, she just covered her eyes. And later on, she never opened it at all. And the people around say, what a great Pativrata she is, because she is covering her eyes, because her husband cannot see, etc. And she herself became a victim of this public opinion. And that is how I have treated it. So in this way, I have treated all these characters in the Mahabharata from purely humanistic point of view. So thereby, I could discover new dimensions to the characters which no other earlier poet or earlier writer has done it. And that became acceptable. My treatment became acceptable to the 20th century educated Indian readers. Therefore, Parva became very popular.
Sir, there is when you say this, when you look at it realistically, it also means that, Rama, who is, then you say that he was born in Ayodhya and this specific location, which is, of course, as you know, has been politicized. So is there, what is your view? I mean, is it the right thing to do for the parties to see it? Because once you see it realistically, then fiction becomes a history, which it is not. Right? Because when you say that Ayodhya was here, Rama was here, then it is seen as history, and when you do it realistically. And even in your own works, because in our conversations earlier, you said it was an aesthetic treatment, right? So when you do that, is that do you think that realistic mode was superior to the other way in which Mahabharata was written?
No, I don't say it is other way. Suppose, just recently I have published Ramayana, which I have written from the point of view and experience of Sita. How does Sita look at the whole of Ramayana story? From the point of view of her own experience, which no other poet has so far done it. Therefore, it is completely my treatment. Now the thing is, your question is, do you treat Rama as a historical character? I have not treated it as a history. I have treated it as a fiction. But the thing is, Ramayana and Mahabharata characters have become, have so much occupied the Indian psyche. Wherever you go, there are, for example, how many Rampurs are there in India? So many Rampurs in Uttar Pradesh and more number of Rampurs in Karnataka. And there is a hill called Kunti Hill, Kunti Betta in Karnataka, etc. Because Kunti came here. So you can't say, how can you historically prove, from this Hastinavati to Karnataka, 2,000 miles distance, how could don't ask that question, because it has occupied the whole of India. It has unified the whole of India. The real thing is, Vedas are the basis of Indian culture. The essence of Vedas are the Upanishads. And then what is the essence of the Upanishads? In order to write down the essence of the Upanishads, there came a great rishi by name Badarayana, and he wrote what is called Brahma Sutra. They became famous as Badarayana's Brahma Sutra. And then later on, the Sutra is always a succinct statement of a profound truth. That is the meaning of Sutra. Like E equals mc squared. Einstein wrote E equals mc squared. How many of people can understand it? In order to understand it, so many people had to do, analysis, etc. So this way, Badarayana's Brahma Sutra became very difficult. In order to explain Badarayana's Brahma Sutra, so many acharyas came. Shankaracharya, Ramanacharya, Vallabhacharya, Madhvacharya, etc. But all these things ordinary people cannot understand. I retired as a professor of philosophy, but I have not understood it. Just imagine. Now, then in what way can you say that Vedas are the foundations of Indian culture? It is Ramayana and Mahabharata. Because Ramayana depicts the value system of Treta Yuga. Mahabharata depicts the value system and the value conflicts of Dwapara Yuga. Therefore, their concept of epics is different from the European concept of ethics. Because through this Ramayana and Mahabharata, all philosophies, all our ethics, it is not merely Bhagavad Gita, which is the important thing in the Mahabharata. There are so many, Bhishma Niti, Vidura Niti, hundreds and thousands of slokas are there, etc. So this way, it became popular, and all Indian languages have written their own versions of Ramayana and Mahabharata, and they have developed it. And what was your question?
Yeah, no, I was talking about it. Now, listening to you, it is, there was a controversy some time back on the Ramanujan's essay on 1,000 Ramayanas. So what you are saying is, you are actually endorsing that there are thousands of Ramayanas. And you know about the controversy that, the essay was banned, and and so on and so forth. So what do you think about this banning and...
You see, this banning, etc., there is a history. I think during the British period, the tragedy of our Indian scholarship is when Islam invaded India, our great philosophers never studied Islam in original. Neither Shankaracharya or anybody never bothered to study their religion. And they said, well, it is a religion like our own religion. All of our, everything says, Ekam Sata Vipraha Bahudha Vadanti. In the same way, they say, call it Allah, we call it Ishvara, etc., etc. They had never studied it. It is Dayananda Saraswati who first studied Islam and Christianity in their original. And after studying it, he started criticizing them, saying, our concept of God or religion is superior to your concept. There came, the Muslims started opposing and then attacking the Hindus. British were ruling. At that time, the British wanted peace, political peace. Therefore, they say, it is an offense to criticize other people's and to wound the religious sentiment of any group, etc. They made a law. And many laws which the British made continued and they became incorporated in our constitution also. Now, when Salman Rushdie's book came into India, Indian Muslims opposed it. Therefore, our government immediately said, yes, here is a column in our law, therefore let us ban it. They banned it. So they went on banning. Becoming sensitive to the minority religions. Then the Hindus became awakened and then said, they turned the table and then said, ban this also, ban that also, ban Ramanujan's essays also, etc. See, actually, in India, religious tolerance is at most in Indian religions only, because as early as the 6th century BC, Buddhism came and Buddhism said it rejected the concept of God, it rejected the concept of Atma, and it rejected the concept of the Shashvata, etc. And then right from that time, between the Vedantins and the Buddhists, so many arguments also took place, etc. So many Vedantins became Buddhists and so many Buddhists became Vedantins. Conversion, reconversion, it was take place. But it was always, I have described in my novel Sartha, I have described it, saying that how Shankaracharya and Mandana Mishra, sit in judgment, sit in argument for days together in the presence of great scholars. And this conversion was only in that sense, not in the way of, proselytization. So Jainism came in India and so many discussions were taking place, whether God exists or not, etc. So many arguments were taking place in this country. Therefore, there was religious tolerance was, the best example was Indian soil. But what happened later on was, the government started using the law which the British made, and then fight is taking place. The best way is to remove that law. You are saying you have every right to, because all discussions should be academic. The government can only say you have every right to criticize any religion in the world, including the religions which are in India. Only thing is, use logical language, don't use emotional language. There, the law should stop, court should stop. But the government has the guts to do it. The best way is to remove that law.
What is, in your view, is the function of literature? Because you had talked about Rasanubhuti in some other place, and that you felt was the prime objective of literature.
You see, it is only if you study Indian tradition, what is the purpose of literature? The traditionally accepted East Indian poetics or Indian aesthetics is study of rasa. Abhinava Gupta and all those people have consolidated it. And I personally believe that it is rasanubhuti which makes literature. What is the meaning of rasanubhuti? You go to, what happens is, in our human experience, the reality of our human experience, somebody is suffering in my neighborhood. Yes, as a human being, I must have sympathy for that. But I am governed by so many other considerations. Maybe my neighbor's father has done some injustice to my father or my grandfather, etc., etc. So all this kalushita and all this dirt is in my mind. Therefore, let us create imaginary characters. Let us create imaginary relationship between the characters, and then it becomes very easy for us to treat them without any prejudice, and then explore the characters, and then you can have pure emotions without personal indulgence. This is called rasanubhuti. And then you can find out the real truth of human nature. See, human nature is varied. Then you can find it out. That is our tradition. What happens during the modern time is, what is the function of literature? Especially the influence of Marxists in Indian literature. Now, the Marxist theory of literature is, literature should be an instrument of social change. Every art should become an instrument of social change. So therefore, under this influence, they say, literature, what is your contribution to our society? They ask a literary person. In the same way, you see, in communist Russia, they were giving what is called, Marxist or philosophical training to every profession, including a doctor or including an engineer. Everybody, they were giving this training. And they were asking the literary person, what is your commitment? What is what is truth? What is duty? What is art? Etc., etc. So this way, in India, Marxism has very heavily influenced our literary writers. Fortunate thing is, Marxists could not interfere with our music, classical music. Otherwise, they would have asked the question, in what way the raga which you are singing, rag todi in the morning, in what way is it helping the society? Unfortunately, they cannot ask this question because they don't know music. Most of the Marxists don't know Indian classical music. And if they know Indian classic music, they cease to be Marxists, because Indian music is far above any aesthetic theory, etc. So, if you want to know what is rasa, the best example you can give for rasa is Indian classical music. Because each raga has its own purest form of rasa. Purest form of rasa. It has it. One other thing is, important thing is, in India, drama, music, dance, story, there is no difference between all these things. All are intermixed. Bharata did not write only for story. It is Natya Shastra actually. Natya includes music, Natya includes dance, etc. So our aesthetics more complete than ordinary literary theories, etc. Now, what is important is, there is so much of invasion by these theories into our literature, what is the purpose? Our social situation changes from time to time, from decade to decade. And if you write according to one theory, after 10 years, you become obsolete. Then what is the subject matter for you? It is the purest human emotions, which are common to all the people, which are common to people of all the countries, all the societies. And then only your writing becomes relevant even to future generations, and then only your literature will survive. Therefore, my personal belief is my literature, I write for the sake of rasa. It doesn't mean I indulge in rasa as an emotion. I get into rasa only when I only when I reach the deepest of human problem, the deepest of human predicament, and the deepest of human suffering, human joy, etc. in its purest form. That is what is rasa according to me, and that is my ideal of writing. I don't write for the sake of any other theory, but my writing, I believe, I try to include, or I try to go to the deepest level of problem of whatever you are saying, including what the Marxists are also saying. Yeah.
See, one of your novels, Kavalu, was highly criticized by the women groups and other organizations. And one of their complaints was that it leaves an impression when you read the novel at the end of it, is that the woman's place is the kitchen, and she can only go so far and not beyond. So that's the impression that one gets, after reading the novel. But there are some comments that you have made in your Bitti about your sister. You say that she was as intelligent as you, she was as capable, she had everything that you had, but unfortunately because she is of a different gender, that she was denied all the opportunities. So that's your personal view, but this is something that comes out of Kavalu. So what do you have to say for this?
You see, the thing is, some special consideration should be given to women. It is not merely the problem of our country, but it is the problem of every country. It is the problem of gender difference. It is nature which has made this difference, etc. And therefore, how can we give special consideration? For example, when a woman becomes pregnant, when she gives birth to a child, how much of leave should be given to her? 6 months, 9 months, or 1 year? Now, why should it be given? Because after all, it is she who is getting the child. It is her personal business. Why should the company give her, leave with salary? Why should the government taxpayer give leave with salary, etc.? That is not the question. Because by getting a child, she is contributing to the society so that the society can continue. So there are certain functions which women are doing. And in addition to it, she has, special capacities also, and all these capacities, should blossom. And it is a contribution to society. Therefore, all this should be given. In addition to it, there must be culture in society. We speak of, women freedom, etc. The ideal situation is, even at 12 o'clock in the midnight, a woman should be able to walk freely in the street without, anybody attacking her. Almost, every day we read in newspapers, etc. Yes, you include this, what is that girl's name? Abhaya in Delhi.
Nirbhaya.
Nirbhaya. That at that time, they appointed a committee with retired Supreme Court judge as the chairman, etc., etc. What did that committee do? That committee only judge increase the punishment from 7 years to 10 years. Is there any difference between 7 years and 10 years? Absolutely no difference. Because a person who is in jail for 7 years, he will enjoy jail life because better food is given to him there. That is not the problem. How do you change the cultural attitude of people, especially cultural attitude of the male, etc. If you take the actual gender difference, the male is always aggressive. In sex also, the male is always aggressive. Take the lower animals also, male is always aggressive. And woman's sexual aggressiveness is rare. Now, for that, how do you control the male? It is only by culture. It is only by teaching the male to behave in a cultured manner. So, the question of culture comes in our education through the parents and through the neighborhood, etc., etc. Until and unless we address this basic psychological problem, this problem cannot be solved. Now, you gave the example of my sister. At that, absolute situation, that poor situation, I could study and I could come up. Sometimes I had slept alone. I have slept in the railway station, in the bus stand. As a boy, I could do it. But my sister, how could she sleep in the railway station? I mean, as a girl, how could she? Now, can we imagine an ideal situation where a woman also, a girl also could sleep safely in the railway station, etc.? Now, why is it that situation is not there? Because some special consideration should have been given to girls' education. Now, that was not given, that was not existing even now, etc. So these are all, cultural problem which the whole society, which the whole government should do it. Therefore, I am very much sympathetic to women. Special treatment should be given. Special consideration should be given. Special consideration should be given. Now, it is not existing. Now, you refer to my novel,
Kavalu.
Kavalu, etc. See, I have, created the character of Gauramma in my novel,
Grahabhanga.
the novel Grahabhanga, etc.
Nanjamma.
I have created so many characters, in my Parva and various all other novels. In Kavalu, I have taken a story of how this dowry harassment is misused by some women. Is it not a misuse? Even now, Supreme Court itself has has commented upon this and then saying this dowry harassment, the accused should not be automatically arrested by a lower police officer, but such a case should be decided by a senior police officer because this case is being misused. Is there no misuse? See, when I wrote this novel, Parva, this Kavalu, some women's group, made a concerted comment saying Bhairappa is anti-women, and some feminists made that Bhairappa is anti-women, etc. Now, a seminar was held on this. There was a huge gathering. At the end of the seminar, at the left side, there were women who were aged past 60, 70 years. And when I was about to leave the auditorium, those ladies called me and then said, Mr. Bhairappa, please come, we want to discuss with you. And then I went near them, and then they said, sir, we have made an association which is called the Association of Nonda Attayaru.
Mother-in-laws.
The
Distressed.
harassed mother-in-laws association. the harassed mother-in-laws association we have made, and we are, and each month in Bangalore we meet in a park, and month by month our membership is increasing. And this law, this mischievous law should be controlled in a proper way. What should we do? Then I just told him, look, our Kannada man is our law minister at that time. Veerappa Moily was the law minister. Why don't you approach him? And then I said, you know, if we approach Veerappa Moily, then Veerappa Moily will say, Madam should give the permission to it. And then the Madam will not give permission because she is considered, you know, she is concerned with various other considerations. I need not tell you those considerations. Once a law is made, it is very difficult to remove it, etc. See, in India, when the lawmakers, for anything, you know, they make the law in such a way that there is a saying in Kannada, your ಇದು ಗಂಡು ಹಸುಗೆ ಏನು ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ? ಗಂಡು ಹಸುಗೆ ಎತ್ತು
Ox.
Yes, your ox has given birth to a calf. Someone says, your ox has given birth to a calf. Then the owner will say, oh, in that case, give, you know, all the treatment which you know, delivery given woman. In Kannada we call it Bananti. You know, give all the treatment to the hogs. In this way, our lawmakers do not understand what will be the negative consequences. After all, even in medicine, the doctor should, you know, considers if a medicine is administered, what will be the negative effect of this medicine. In the same way, the negative aspect and the mischievous use of, no, they don't do it. They just make law. That is all. There are many such laws. You go to the next.
Yeah. See, in your personal beliefs, you know, for example, you know, you did not perform the last rites of your father, you don't, you know, do shraddha of any of your parents, you don't believe in caste, you don't believe in any rituals,
yes,
right? And while there is the political parties and everybody plays around these beliefs of people, right? What is your take on this? What is your take on this? What's your view on this? In the way that, because you are a person who does not believe in this, while you have created works which, you know, which is full of these people. So you have an insight into this.
You see, when I create the character, I depict the belief of that character also. Otherwise, you know, I cannot impose my belief into the character. My personal belief is, I have been a student of philosophy, I have studied philosophy, and whether the concept of God, whether there is such a thing as God, whether God exists, and if God exists, what is His function, and what is His duties and responsibilities, and what is His relationship with the human being, and what is the history of different origin of different religions, and so on and so forth. I have studied in it. Therefore, see, the real problem is, if you study philosophy, you know what is the real philosophical questions and what are not philosophical questions. Philosophy teaches you this. Because I have studied philosophy, I know what are real philosophical problems and what are not, maybe sociological problems, maybe economic problems, and various other things, etc. I know this difference, so I do not have the belief in many of the rituals. But philosophically speaking, I believe Vedas are the collection of many insights into human realities, many insights into the values. And later on they were summarized in the Upanishads, later on summarized in the Bhagavad Gita. And I think that everyone should read. In the school, we must teach the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. But when I say Bhagavad Gita, I don't mean the, worshipping the Lord Krishna, etc. I don't believe in it. But the real essence, philosophical essence of the Bhagavad Gita, the real origin of Bhagavad Gita's teaching is Upanishads. At least we must teach them in a philosophical manner so that we will not fall prey into simple rituals, etc.
Now, we'll open the floor to questions. Before that, one last question to you. If you have to choose your leanings, left, right, center, right of the center, left of the center, what would you choose?
No, I don't believe in this left or right or etc. etc. You see, when we got independence, this leftism was the fancy of Jawaharlal Nehru. He was in Cambridge, just as you have your JNU today in India. It was the center of leftism, and those days it was an academic center in Cambridge, and Nehru was influenced by it, and he was very much influenced by Russian Stalin, Lenin, etc., etc. And he imposed his leftism in Indian politics, and the Indian communists were there, and then Indian communists also came to Nehru and then said, we will support you. We will support you in your ideas, because the communists knew that they could not come to power independently. Therefore, this leftism became very much popular. And then Nehru brought his theory of what is called the socialistic pattern of society, and so on and so forth. During Indira Gandhi's time, taxation in India was at the highest level, 70.5% plus surcharge. 70.5% tax plus surcharge. N.A. Palkhiwala wrote a book called The Highest Taxed Nation, N.A. Palkhiwala. Now, what was the result? Who does business, who does in any industry, if everything was given to government plus surcharge, etc., and then become a pauper? In this situation, two kinds of accounts came into being, black and white, black and white. Indira Gandhi knew about it, and then she allowed it. And after some time, when black money was